the push was being made by second wave feminists that men and women are essentially the same, right? And you and I, we've got kids, boy and girl represented. They're not the same, right?
Mm-mm.
And no one taught them to be different.
Mm-mm.
They're just wired differently, right? Equal, but
Mm-hmm.
wired differently. And I'll probably put it up on the screen here for the final broadcast, but I've always used this analogy. I know I've shared this with you, is that the way that men and women see the world is, and again, this is just an analogy. It's like men can only see in monochrome, but they can see the darks and the bright spots
Mm-hmm.
of a picture, whereas women can't see the darkness tones, but they can see in full color, right?
Yes.
And yes, and so you need both to get a full picture of what we're capable as the human race of seeing, right? And so in the visible spectrum. And so, using that analogy, once you start going down the road of saying, well, men and women are essentially the same in every way, then you're already starting to erode at all the other stuff is coming after that, right? And there's a popular analogy I've heard used now, especially in the debate of what to do in the aftermath of COVID, as now we have this new right wing coalition, including former liberals. And the argument has been made that some of the former liberals, they don't want society to collapse. And the analogy in that case is being made of like a boulder falling off the top of a mountain and getting all the way down into the canyon. Right? It seems we all like our rock analogies. But a liberal has been argued as someone who wants to roll the rock only halfway down the mountain.
Oh yeah, it needs to fall, but it needs to fall into the format that I want, into the ditch that
Yeah,
I need.
yeah, exactly. So with that said, like it reminds me. I've been looking for this one online for a while, but C.S. Lewis was attributed when I saw it years ago to have said that, we should be like people who coming along a fence and coming to a gate which is locked, asking why that gate was locked before we open it up, not just saying I wonder what's inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what we've done now over the last 100 years is we've basically unlocked so many gates in our society today that we don't know very fundamental questions like what is a marriage, why is marriage even here, and why is it important, and we don't know, what families are for, how to raise kids. There's a lot of, I mean, even in our town right now, we've had two high-profile suicides amongst teenagers recently,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you have to ask yourself, okay, how much of this is just again the combination of all this stuff, all this instability that we've brought into our homes, culminating now in a society where kids really just don't feel the need to live anymore,
Yep.
right? So that's again, I just wanted to kind of cover some baselines here because I think that this is, this is a challenge we need to take on, right? If the response, the anti woke movement, right, a movement back to normalcy, a move to make, you know the country, restored to its former glory, right, in the United States and the West for that matter as well, we have to take on this question of, well, what was marriage intended for, right? Obviously there's a biblical answer to that, but even as I said, even 100 years ago, non-Christians had a very clear understanding of why we had marriage and why we had family structures and households. I think we need to get back to that, right? Not all the problems that came 100 years ago, but you can get back to the good without taking on the bad, right? With from 100 years ago, right? It just depends on how you go about it and approach it, right? But what we have today in our family structures today is clearly not working. So we have to get that boulder back up the hill,
Mm-hmm.
right? Speaking figuratively about that. So I guess from that standpoint, then, I'll ask you this next question. So we've covered what the average person thinks marriage is today, which is really not a whole lot, right? It's a great party, right? An excuse for a great party, I should say. Let's start now on the other side of the spectrum and say, what is marriage according to a biblical Christian worldview that, say, Christians and, Orthodox Jews would hold to?
So from our perspective, since we're going, from the opposite side of the spectrum, not secular, it would be that yes, we're coming together in a union, just like all marriage is, but it is specifically being um, brought together by the Lord, to not be separated. Um, so it's not some kind of magical voodoo. It's not jumping a broom or anything like that. Um, that we are coming together as two broken people, knowing that, um, yes, leaning on each other, but also, depending on the Lord to keep us together through this crazy life, because everyone, secular, non secular, they have crazy lives. It's just who they lean on that makes the difference. And that makes a difference in marriage as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so there's a practical aspect of marriage, right? Which is, as you said, it's meant to be lifelong.
Hmm.
The Bible does speak in our church, as you know, went through. We had Brian on here last time, and he also goes to our church, and we were talking about how we had a multi-month long series on marriage and divorce, which was fantastic. There are exceptions that are clearly called out in Scripture
Yes.
that Jesus and basically God regulate, right?
Hmm.
But at the same time, that's not the intention, right? In the way I like that Vodi Bakum, teacher that will probably be mentioned a lot on this channel. The way that he put it in one of his books or sermons, I can't remember which, is that you don't have any parents, right, who at least like the kid that is marrying their kid,
Hmm.
right, go to a wedding of one of their kids saying, "I hope this ends."
Yeah.
Right? Like if there's goodwill at a wedding, the guests are hoping that this is going to last.
Hmm.
Right? It's only because of our selfishness, right? It's only because of our sin, right? That these marriages fall apart. Now, there could be two parties at fault that cause a divorce, but there's at least one always, right?
Yeah.
The modern concepts introduced by Ronald Reagan in the late 1960s of no fault divorce, quote unquote, is really a ridiculous concept
Hmm.
when you consider that in law, everything else, right, with the exception of maybe some jurisdictions that have no fault car accidents, right, they do exist, but really what they mean is that both parties are at fault in some way, right,
Oh, yeah.
right. But the idea that a divorce is caused and it's just nobody's fault, right,
Yeah.
is really a ridiculous concept.
Absolutely. There's no it can't it always takes two to tango. In this no fault divorce setting. Um because I know you just said there are um there are definite reasons for divorce, and there are. And those are very unfortunate that happens, but we're in a fallen world, so they happen. But with no fault divorce, it takes two to tango.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, maybe to extend your analogy, if it takes two to tango, you could have both partners saying, "We're not dancing anymore," in which case they're both at fault.
Yep.
Or you can have one of them walk out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously there's no tango anymore. But
Mm-hmm.
that one person who walked out is the one who's at fault there, right?
Yes.
And so you can, I said, like from a biblical perspective, you do have abandonment,
Mm-hmm.
right, by someone who's, even in the act, giving a strong hint that they wouldn't be a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then you also have obviously adultery as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's where we have to start as far as understanding the legal challenges to marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Right now is that the court systems across all the jurisdictions in the West, pretty much, I don't know of any of them that actually bring any kind of level of scrutiny to a divorce, right? No one's sitting there and going, well, who's to blame for you guys getting here, right?
No.
Yeah, and we'll get into this in future weeks, but there's even a biblical counselor that has written some books that I'll get to in future discussions. Fantastic guy, but he's even argued that there's a lot of counselors inside especially inside the church and also outside who all but just basically beg for ruining the marriage, right? When it hits the rocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, marriage is not always easy, right? Marriage is not always a cup of tea, right?
Yeah. I think, what is it called? Irreconcilable differences.
Yes, that's the
Yeah.
kind of catch-all no fault divorce
Hmm.
excuse that is
Yep.
used, right? But I do believe that, especially over the last three generations, there's been a lot of good marriages that have been allowed to not fail, but have actually, I'll say, there's a lot of good marriages that have been destroyed from within and also from without, right? Where you have people, as one person put it to me once, is that there are people out there, even sadly, even in the church, tragically in the church, who are basically adding gasoline to the fire,
Hmm.
right? And that's not right at all. So we have that idea. Now, let's we talked about what the average person thinks of marriage today, right? It's
Hmm.
basically two people professing their love for each other, which, can go away at any given time, right? As Tina Turner said, what's love got to do with it?
It's got to do.
It's got to do, yes.
Yeah.
It's got to do. Yeah, good. That's good.